What's up, Moto Buddies? Mike here, Taco Moto Co. Taco Tours. Today we're going to do a showdown between a 2020 Honda CRF450L and a 21 KTM 500 Exc-F. So these are not identical years, but that's okay. The 20 plus KTMs have all been the same. Right now we are filming this here in May, and the 2022 models will be rolling out, hitting the showrooms soon. There's really no updates or significant changes to the KTMs between the 20, 21, and 22. There's some graphic changes, a couple of minor suspension valving issues, or changes rather, pretty insignificant. As far as the Honda, since its release, I think it came out in 2018, which made it possibly a model year 2019. And it's been relatively unchanged except for some graphic changes between the 21 and 22. They also made a ECU change, mapping change between 20 and 21, with some attempts to try to make the low throttle angle tip in a little smoother and a little less abrupt. And the reviews are a bit mixed on that as to how well it worked. We'll get into some of the rideability parts later. So right now what I'm going to walk you through is a side-by-side between the equipment, what some of the specs are, and how these two machines compare with each other, and ultimately sort of trying to help you decide which one of these might be the bike that's for you. Now, these machines approach the dual sport discipline, the multi-sport discipline, from two different like ideological platforms, and I think you'll see it'll be evident through the data where each manufacturer is trying to, like, what kind of customer they're trying to target. And there's some overlap, but then there's some differences. So let's get into it. Let's talk about curb weight. That's often the thing that's cited most often. The Honda is 289, and then the KTM is 247. These are US pounds. All these specs are going to be in US specs. The KTM is 25% lighter. Now, why is that significant? If you're riding these machines as a dirt bike, single track, if you're a spirited, sporting type of rider, the KTM wins hands down. It's 25% lighter. Where the weight for the Honda might help you, the additional weight, is if you're doing more BDR type roads, more double track, more pavement. Some of that riding, the weight will be to your benefit. So you can see that there's there's benefits, upsides and downsides to weight. As far as the engine, the Honda is a 450. It's it's marketed as a 450. It's 449 cc's actual, and then the KTM is 510. So as far as displacement, KTM's a winner there. As far as the camshaft, both of them are single overhead camshafts, so that's a tie. Compression ratio on the Honda is 12 to 1, 12.75 to 1 on the KTM. So a little bit higher compression, so a little bit higher engine pressure, piston pressure. And so the concern there for both of these is these are relatively high. In fact, the KTM has increased compression from the 17 through 19 generation up from like around 11 to 12.75. So almost 2 points. That is an improvement in power. Where you might end up with problems is detonation, and that could be fuel quality issues when you're riding these bikes, both of them really, when you're riding them, say, in Mexico. What I do when I'm in Mexico riding my KTM, the 500, is I've got two strategies. One is, if I think about it, and remember, I will bring some octane boost, and I'll just carry that in my backpack or put that in the chase truck. And so my bike will detonate. In map 1, I run a GET ECU on my KTM. And so another strategy is I've got a low octane map that I can load through the app into the ECU, and that pulls away some of the ignition, and then it just ups the fuel a little bit to compensate and to correct for detonation. And I'm a little bit down on power, but I don't have to worry about any piston damage, detonation issues. So I've got some strategies that I employ when I run my KTM. And as far as the Honda, the bike here, the example here, this one has a Vortex ECU, and so I believe there is a softer ignition map that you could switch over to. So there's some strategies there. You could also do the same thing with some octane boost. So pretty equal there as far as those go. So I'm going to call that a relative tie. The KTM has a higher compression ratio. But in terms of what the net effects are, I think I'll just call that a tie. In fact, some of these data points, they're just so close to each other. If they're within a couple of percentage points, 2, 3, 4 percentage points, I'm just going to call it a tie rather than, be super nitpicky when they're that close. As far as bore and stroke goes of the two engines, the Honda is a 9662, 96, the piston diameter is 96, and then the stroke is 62. These are in millimeters. 9572 on the KTM. So the KTM is a long stroke. It is essentially like it's a tractor engine. It's just a big, long stroke diesel engine, and you can feel that, and the torque curves also demonstrate that. So if you're looking for that low end from idle through mid-range power, then that's the 500 hands down. And if you're looking for the power to come on strongest in the mid-range all the way up to the top, that's the Honda. Because of the shorter stroke of the Honda, it has faster piston speeds, and so it'll rev and hit harder. So the true motocross feel of the 450 engine class is absolutely there with the Honda, where it's not as much with the KTM. The KTM's slower revving, slower to rev, slower to get there, but with more torque and power while it's getting there. So I have to call that a tie. I mean, it's all rider preference. So one is not better than the other. That's true rider preference as far as what those numbers mean. Trannies are both 6-speed, so that's a tie. As far as the clutch goes, KTM uses a DDS type of setup, and you could do some research on that. Basically, what's happening is there is a Belleville spring. It's a dome spring washer that's applying a equal force across the plates. The Honda uses the more traditional multi-spring. It's little coil springs with screws that hold each one down. That's the standard and traditional motocross clutch pack setup. That's what Honda's using over there. The one advantage I would say, so I'm going to give the win on the clutch pack to the KTM. It's renowned for its smoothness. Durability of the clutch plates is better, and of course that's user dependent. Also, a guy can burn out a DDS clutch just as quickly as he can a standard clutch pack with a multi-spring. But the longevity, the classic longevity, the typical longevity of the KTM DDS clutch is better than on the standard spring clutch. Also, the KTM clutch has dampers, so there's a set of 6 dampers that live inside of the KTM clutch. So the KTM clutch is better as far as like serviceability. Those dampers are relatively easy to replace. On the Honda, there's dampers in the clutch, but you have to drill out rivets and do some surgery to get access to those. So it's easier in the KTM than it is on the Honda. So I think overall there is an edge to the KTM rather. And then talking about the clutch lever, it's cable actuated up until 21. I think in 21, I'll need to research that. I'll throw that up in the notes here. But I think in 21, Honda came out with a hydraulic. Finally, congrats, Honda. Welcome to the 21st century. Honda came out with a hydraulic clutch. In fact, quite a few of the Asian bikes are starting to upgrade their clutch to hydraulic. And the advantage of that is an easier, lighter pull, more accurate feel, and then it's automatic uptake. You don't have to adjust it, so you don't have to get in there as the clutch pack wears and screw around with adjustments on the, so like just to take a quick look at that, see how this adjusting knob is right here on the clutch for the Honda. So because it's cable actuated, you have to adjust that as it wears. You don't have to do any of that with the KTM. So I think for me anyway, there's a strong win here with the KTM overall and everything related to the clutch. As far as the frames, KTM uses a steel perimeter frame. Or I'm sorry, not perimeter, but a steel sort of backbone. So the frame comes through underneath the gas tank in one spar, and then it splits down here at the shock in the rear and then goes down to the foot pegs, whereas on the Honda, it's an aluminum perimeter. So it's more of that classic Japanese setup where it's a single post here at the triple clamp underneath the triple, and it splits and then goes down to the foot pegs. And so that's a more classic approach for the Asian bikes, and KTM uses a steel. Now, Honda is the only dual sport, so we're talking about dual sports here. Honda is the only dual sport that uses the motocross style, Asian style perimeter aluminum frame. All of the other dual sports, all the Austrians, so that would be the KTM and Husky, as well as like Beta and Sherco, all those other, the Europeans, they're using steel frames, classic standard steel frames, and then Honda is the only dual sport. So there are some dynamic differences. There are those who will say that the steel frame offers a more, it's sturdier, less chassis flex. And so what guys will do with the Hondas is they will play around, and you can see here on this bike that it's got a aftermarket frame, engine frame brackets. And so there's guys who will do things to the Hondas to try to change the chassis feel, chassis dynamics. Guys will also play with the torque of the bolts, the engine mounts. And so there's ways that you can play around with chassis feel and dynamics to both bikes, but the Honda arguably is tunable, or more tunable, in that you can do those things to change it. So is there a clear winner here? I mean, in my opinion, I think the standard KTM frame, for me anyway, is a win because of the ease of maintenance. And we'll get into some of the things, where that plays out a little bit later with some of the maintenance items. This is my little cheat sheet here. Sorry, that's getting in the frame. Okay, so that's frame. I think KTM probably is the winner there, but that's subjective. So that's not a clear data winner. That's just probably my opinion. Wheelbase, both of them are 58 inches. That's a tie. Ground clearance on the KTM is 14 versus 12.6. On the Honda, that's 10% better. So that's a win for the KTM. Suspension travel on the Honda is 12 inches. This is fork travel, 12 inches versus 11.8. That's 2%. That's a tie as far as I'm concerned. Total load capacity. Now, this is an interesting one. So this is like GVWR, gross vehicle weight, right? You know what I'm talking about. And on the Honda, it's low, but I think it's artificially low. It's very strange. So Honda, by the book, says that their load capacity is 223. So that means you can put 223 pounds by the manufacturer's rating on that bike. Obviously, that's unrealistic because it is. Because we're all aware of guys who weigh much more than 223 pounds riding these bikes. And then we know that there are guys who are loading 40 and 50 pounds worth of gear on these bikes. So we know that people are riding 2-up on these bikes, and they don't crack, they don't break, the frame doesn't snap, the wheels don't fly off, it doesn't burst into flames and explode. So why would they artificially, and I think, push that number down? I think it's just safety. I think that's a lawyer-driven number. I think that is probably the reason there. If you know of any insider reason as to why that number's so low, I don't think it's strength of the frame. I don't think it's safety and load capacity of that frame. It's very stout. I know of no reports of anyone breaking their Honda motorcycle when they exceed that 230-pound weight capacity. So I am in full disclaimer and full disclosure. I am not telling you to do anything outside of the parameters of the owner's manual. However, anecdotally, we all know that everyone's putting whatever weight is sort of, whatever, guys are loading up these bikes. So do what you think is best. But that is the published number, 223. Now on the KTM, their published number, I know it anecdotally. I couldn't find it, couldn't look it up in the book. I maybe didn't have the wherewithal or the energy to do it. But I know that it's almost over 400 pounds. It's probably a little bit over 400 pounds. So why is it so significant? Why is it like twice on the KTM at the Honda? It's not the frame. I think that just for whatever reason, KTM has decided they didn't want to, publish such a low number. Maybe they're just a little more risky. I don't know. But the same thing holds true with the KTM. I don't know of anybody that's breaking their bikes. Let's use this as a segue to talk about the subframe. Now, here is something that is significantly different with a huge win for the Honda, and that's the subframe. So taking a look at that, I've got the seat here on this bike. Now, it is a perimeter external, so exoskeleton kind of situation with the Honda, just like it is on the KTM. These are identical as far as both bikes go, so they both mount to a central point here, kind of above the foot peg. Very, very... this area is exactly the same. In fact, the subframes are pretty much the same. Where the Honda is significantly better is the fact that when we line up the seat right here, this is where the seat goes, we have like 13 inches more of subframe that comes back. And so the fender is going to end somewhere back here, right, over the tail light. And so if you're the kind of guy who's going to load up, or gal, and you're going to throw some soft bags over the tail end of this bike, you are distributing that weight across aluminum spar subframe, which goes down into the chassis frame. That is huge. That's a big deal. That's super significant and a total slam dunk win for the Honda. By doing that, you will scratch up your, and who cares, I guess, right? You're gonna scratch that all up. Now, Adventure Spec, as well as a few other companies, make, and we're gonna be installing some of that on this bike here, because you get this rub here when your soft bags are over the top. This bike happens to belong to Ashley from Taco Moto, and so she obviously is throwing her Moscow bags across her bike, and it's scratching it up. And so, you know, that's ugly, right? So what we're going to do is throw on an Adventure Spec rear rack, which is just sort of a plate rack here, and then it comes with these nice, very cool, I really like this, nice brackets here on the side. Maybe when we get that all installed and the bike is put back together and looking good again, we'll do a quick review of that and talk about that. But as far as the subframe goes, Honda's a winner. Now let's come over here and take a look at this KTM. So what's happening here is same situation. We've got our aluminum spar subframe that mounts into really strong anchor points here, and then up just above the shock, where's the bolt? Right there. So it's not the shock bolt, it's a separate bolt. So that bolt is the top spar of the subframe. But here is where the KTM loses as far as this metric goes. So the subframe ends right here. You can see the muffler, the rear muffler. Here's the two muffler brackets. This is the rear one. So the subframe effectively ends an inch or two back, but effectively ends at the rear bracket for the muffler. The seat bolt, which is right here. See this hole here in the seat and right here. So the seat, so you could just kind of say that your subframe on your KTM ends basically at your seat bolt or your muffler bracket. Or even exactly the two bolts down here that hold the rear sort of plastic clip on. Okay, so that's where your subframe ends. The rest of this is plastic. There's no support, no structural support other than the plastic fender itself. So when you have soft bags and you throw them back on here, everything is being carried by the subframe. I do know of guys who, the bolts, and this is the load carrying bolt right here, this one, there's one on the other side, that you can see that flex, that is what carries that downward force of the rear fender. And so I know guys who have broken that off, and I know guys who have collapsed out this fender. So if you're going to load up the rear end of your KTM, you need to do a couple of things. You need to either bias as much of the weight of that forward as possible onto the seat, and then there are plenty of guys who will do that. They will push forward their bags and let as much weight as possible get carried on the seat, and then whatever spillover weight is on the rear of the fender. Obviously, the farther forward you are, the better the weight capacity. And then as you get out here to the end, it's just, you know, nothing more than curved plastic. So how guys are dealing with that is you can throw a rack on here. And I have an Adventure Spec rack for the KTMs that we're going to be testing out and trying. Also True North, you've heard us talk about those. So it is essential, I believe, that if you're going to load up your bike, load up your KTM, that you should have a rack to carry the weight. Otherwise, on the Honda, you don't have to do that. So, again, that's a clear win over here for the Honda. Let's talk about seat height. Claimed 37.2 on the Honda, 37.8 on the KTM. So, let's call that one a tie. Stock fuel tank. Fuel on the Honda stock is 2 and then 2.25 on the KTM. Let's call that a tie. That's 12% difference, but both of those are so small. So let's talk about fuel economy. I am getting anywhere between 40 and 50 on the KTMs, and I have heard it said that guys on the Hondas are basically getting about the same. So you might, with the 2 gallons, you might have 100 miles of range out of a stock tank. There are guys who are getting less. I know guys on the stock KTM tank who are getting 80 miles, so they're getting less mileage. And that's so much of mileage is dependent on what you do with the right hand. And that's up to you, what kind of mileage you get. And I also know guys who are getting 60 miles to the gallon out of their KTMs, and they're riding them in more dual sport type of attitudes. So it's impossible to tell you what the mileage of these machines are, but I can tell you, because of those variations, but I can tell you that they're just about equal, if ridden about the same. And so with the stock tank, again, I'm anecdotally seeing and hearing you're getting anywhere between 80 and 100 miles. That's your range with that stock tank. What is the maximum tank size? So the KTM is a 4.5 gallon. The biggest tank you can get that will mount up to that bike in the stock area is 4.5 gallons. The Honda, there is a Nomad tank out of Australia, and here it is right here. That's Ashley's got this on her bike, and it's 5.28 claimed gallons. Now, one of the things that I think differentiates the two numbers, the two data points, is the KTM. It's able to suck its fuel at the very bottom. The inlet port for the fuel pump is right here, this nut. So when you drain your tank low enough, you've still got this bottom area on the other side, which does not have an inlet or a suction point. And so what's happening over there is that's just suspended fuel. It's sort of orphan fuel. But you can lay the bike down and tip it over and then get this wing of gas pulled over onto this side. We do that all the time. Guys do it all the time. No big deal. I think one of the advantages of the KTM situation, their setup, is you're sucking gas. When you're completely out of gas on a KTM, you've got about a quarter, not a little more than a quarter, you've got about a half of an inch worth of fuel just sitting here that you're never going to be able to access. So for all intents and purposes, you've used up 100% of the available gas when you've got even the 4.5 tank. Any of the KTM tanks, you can do that. Here is a big difference with the Honda tank. I'm going to turn this to the side here. So the tank, or the pickup for the tank, is situated right here at the center bottom of the tank. And so any fuel that's down here in the wings, it's unavailable. So all of this gas right down in here. I don't know what kind of volume that is on this Nomad tank. Anecdotally, guys will say that as the tank sloshes around, as the gas sloshes around, you'll be able to pick up whatever is remaining and sitting in these bottom wings of the tank. That's impossible because the suction pickup for this tank is right here. If there was a hose, and there's some clever guy out there who might be able to fashion up something like this, if you could take a straw and let it hang down with sort of an inlet little sinker down here on each side of the wing, then you could completely drain out this tank and get all of it. But this bike with this tank will run out of gas with available gas still here in the wings. So I only point that out. This isn't a ding against the Honda situation, the way they do their tanks. Let's talk about this while we're here. Now, this setup makes servicing the fuel pump considerably easier than it is on the KTM, because you just pop the tank, remove these screws, and the fuel pump assembly drops straight out. It's a very simple and straightforward design. The in-tank sock filter for the fuel pump is not serviceable or replaceable, but it can be cleaned, and you could back flush your system with pressurized some sort of cleaner, even gasoline, but back flush to clean that if you thought it was necessary. I am hearing good reports with the durability of the fuel pump on the Hondas. So I think if we're only specifically talking about the fuel pump, the Honda, I think, probably wins that one, because here's the KTM setup. So let's cover that for a second. This is the fuel pump assembly unit. That's the pump here. The pump motor is right here. That's this tan thing. This is a stock setup. And so here is that drain where, well, the KTM draws its fuel through these two holes right here. And you will say to yourself, man, those little micro baby holes pull in all the fuel that the pump needs as it drops below this crack line, and fuel is sort of able to leak in very easily. So from this point down, you'd say, well, can the KTM drink enough gas through these two little holes? Yeah, it can, it does, and it's grossly overestimated how much fuel volume, fuel flow these things need. There are little products out there that people claim that will make the bike run better or differently if you get rid of kinks and bends in the fuel system, and that's just all fantasy stuff, fantasy claims, because, for example, you can't do anything about the 90-degree bends that are happening inside the pump. So the fuel is being drawn up here through this line right here, goes into the regulator, makes a hard 90 here at the regulator, comes out, and then goes down through the filter, and then out into the, out this threaded, the small threaded end here. So that would be the one to screen left with the O-ring. So there are 90s inside of the fuel pump assembly that you can't do anything about. So just pointing some of those things out. Just one last thought on this. Now, here's something that has been offered, and I would agree with this. Drilling a couple of extra holes into this will allow sloshing fuel to wash over the pump motor. And so if you wanted to, I think this is a fine idea. Drill a couple of holes through the body here. That allows the fuel to just get more access to the pump itself and cool it off, rather than the trapped fuel here inside of the pump, sort of the temperature, the heat of the pump being retained in this small little cavity. So I didn't know we would do a little digression into fuel pumps, but there you go. So the KTM fuel pump situation is more finicky in that you've got these leak points. So you have potential everywhere there is a connection, that's a potential failure point. And this KTM fuel filter is a known failure point. And so I would strongly suggest you get rid of one of these Molle. If you have these Molle plastic filters, they split the seam right here, and they are an absolute classic leak issue, failure point. We very, very soon, hopefully midsummer here, are going to have a CNC in-tank replacement filter. So it's leak-proof because it's aluminum. And then it'll have a stainless steel pleated mesh lifetime, the filter media, the filter canister, and it's cleanable, and it'll have a 200-hour service life. So that's a sweet upgrade coming soon. Back to the Honda. The Honda has a all-in-one unit, and if something were to fail in it, you would just take the whole thing out and it would replace the filter. The filter is integral into that. It's not maybe as convenient as the KTM's in that you could just, as a maintenance item, pull this off and replace it, but that's not possible on the Honda. So, you know, is there a clear winner here? I sort of think the Honda wins because it's less finicky, less prone to failure, and anecdotally I'm hearing of very, very few, not zero, but much fewer fuel pump issues with the Honda than the KTM. The KTM system is a little more finicky. There are ways to make it more bulletproof and more reliable, and we cover those and talk about those in other videos. It's also a little tricky when you pull this out because you've got to feed that fuel pump thing, the fuel pump assembly down, and then get it here to these two holes. I guess they're over here. Get it to the holes to pop it out. So fuel pump maintenance on the KTM a little more, and then it's a little fussy, a little simpler on the Honda, but less serviceable. And then you've got the tank issue where you've got gas in the lower wing. So is there a clear winner there? I don't want to call it a tie. I think I'm going to give the edge to the Honda just because they're having better reliability overall with their fuel system. But in terms of like, can you get all the gas out of the Honda? No, you can't. So maybe it's a split decision in that there's a winner and a loser, and I don't know how you want to classify that, but that's the setup on fuel. So oil capacity, for the Honda is 1.53 quart, 1.6 on the KTM. That's a tie as far as I'm concerned. Stock horsepower, we have been seeing guys getting about 38 horsepower. That's typically what dyno, different guys are getting, about 38, and then we're getting about 39 out of the KTM. So I think we should probably call that a tie. Now, as far as what's available in the KTM, that has a significant improvement to be had through exhaust and intake and fueling changes. And so we're getting these bikes up to around 57 horsepower. So the KTM is able to get to about 57. The Hondas, a little bit less than that with like the Yoshi system here that you see on the bike, and then the Vortex ECU. Soon, we're coming out with the Get ECU for the Hondas, so that's exciting. And then we've also got a Dynojet, that power commander that we've custom tuned for the CRF450Ls and the Yoshi exhaust. And then that map set will work whether you've got the Yoshi or the FMF or the Pro Circuit, whatever exhaust system you have on there, it will work, and it's mapped for that. So MSRP on the Honda is 10,000. That's 9,999. And then on the KTM, it's 11,999. So about 20% more money for the KTM over the Honda. That is significant if you're looking for, if money is tight, the Honda is better value. So the Honda's got the win there. Let me just scan through this really quick to see if I missed anything. I think that's good. Now let's visit each bike in terms of wheels, tires, and suspension. So I've worked on the KTMs for years, and that's our specialty, and I have not spent as much time on the Honda, but I have on this one, and I think that that's a relative tie. It's Nissan for the hydraulic components on the braking system at the lever and at the wheels, and then it's Brembo if you have a KTM. If you have a gas, it's Braking is a brand, and that's out of Spain. The Brembo here on the KTM is out of Italy, and then on the Honda, the Magura, or on the KTM. But KTM has dropped Magura for the 22 model for the Huskies, and it's gone to Brembo. So there are advantages to the Magura. Possibly, in my opinion, the Brembo is better in every way overall. I think, again, this is purely editorial, but I think KTM, I think they made a mistake when they went with Magura on the Husky bikes, and they are reversing course and going back to Brembo. Brembo, in my opinion, is better. So there's that. But they are interchangeable. You can swap out on the, if you have a Husky, you can swap everything out for a Magura, or just run the Magura. Don't worry about it. It's the only issues that people have had are with the hydraulic, the slave cylinder on the clutch, which is not the point of this video. So I won't dive into that. Do your own research on that if that's an issue. So suspension. Now here, I think the Honda is a winner over the KTM. Honda is using a 49 millimeter fork. KTM's a 48. The Honda it is a true split chamber, dual chamber fork, in that it has compression down here, clickers on the compression side on the lower, and then up top is the rebound. Or is it backwards on the Honda? That's a good question. Correct me in the comments. I know you will. I think I have it right. I think compression is down below and rebounds up top. So that is what you get with the Honda, and so that's the most plush setup that you're going to get if you're looking for comfort and plushness for like a dual sport setup. And there's ways that you can change valving and springing to stiffen it up if that's what you like over the plushness of a more dual sport oriented setup. Now on the KTM, they're using a split function fork. So as it comes stock, one side is compression and one side is rebound. And why they've done that is cost savings and weight savings, as far as I'm concerned. Honda has taken, I think, a better approach by maintaining that architecture. They pay for it in weight, but I'm okay with that because the KTM setup, the WP setup, for me anyway, doesn't work good. And I convert all my bikes over to the Race Tech gold valve internals, and then we respring them where needed. And we basically turn them into Showas, right? We make them dual chamber forks, and it costs money, it takes time, and it's kind of a drag where the Showas already have that. They come set up like that. So I'm going to give the suspension nod to the Honda as far as that goes, because the KTM can be made just as good or better, and the Hondas can be then improved as well. And so it's sort of an arms race to the top of, like, air quote, what's best. But I think out of the box, the Honda is for me anyway, I think the Honda gets the win as far as suspension goes. Now let's talk about ergos up here on the cockpit and the triple clamp area as far as bars. The KTM, I think, takes it there because the stock bars are 1 1/8 and the Honda is 7/8. And so what a lot of guys will do is they'll have to replace out their stock bar clamps and then to go to like flex bars, which is what Ashley has here, or, you know, standard like dual wall fatty bars like Renthal bars, that sort of thing, Pro Taper Evos. So you have, if you're going to upgrade bars, then you have to change out the triple clamp. Well, not the triple clamp. You have to change the bar mounts. And KTM's already come up with 1 1/8, so I think KTM wins it there. As far as the triple clamp, they're both cast aluminum, double bolt, and they're opposite pinches. They're basically identical, so that's a tie, I think, as far as that goes. I don't see there's any significant difference there. Speedo, let's talk about that. The Honda Speedo wins. The Honda Speedo kicks the KTM Speedo's butt, and it does it in a couple of significant ways. It has a couple of things. So it has a turn signal indicator light, just like the KTM. It has a high beam light, just like KTM. Here's a huge win for the Honda, neutral light. That's a big deal. It also has you can't see, it's not lit, but it has a red engine temperature over temp. It has a check engine light, which the KTM does as well, and has a low fuel that the KTM does as well. And then the Honda has this cool feature. You know, you've got the trip odometer. Both of them do that. The Honda, where is it? Right there, mileage. So you can see real-time mileage information on the Honda display, and that is a big deal. So the display unit itself on the Honda kicks the KTM's butt. It's not even a contest. KTM display sucks as far as comparison goes. What are some of the other things that are happening here? So I'm going to kick this off. What are some of the other things as far as up top? Keys. The key on the Honda wins. It is rigid mount. It's very secure. It's metal. I think it has a metal body. Might have to correct that. And it's very easy to get access to the electrical components because you've got bolts here, and it's just more secure. So the Honda is taking the approach of this is more of a street bike setup as far as the dash and the key. Over on the KTM, we already talked about the display. Let's go take a look at that. The display really doesn't hold water compared to the to the Honda. What it does have that's the same. It's got a check engine light, and then it has the high beam blue light, and then it's got the low fuel. So it does have those things, but the Honda does too. So the display, as far as that goes, that's definitely the Honda win. And then on the key, now we relocated it. The stock position is up here, and it would be underneath all of this stuff. So we relocated it down here. We used a BRP. Jimmy Rios makes a cool relocation bracket, and so we've got that secured here. The key itself, the mechanism itself is plastic, and the connector is easy to get. One of the things I think that I like, in my opinion anyway, with the KTM is you've got these rubber straps, these little things to pull the headlight. So the mask comes off, for me, way easier than the Honda. And so if you need access to the wiring or anything, yeah, it's super easy to get to with a KTM. It's also breakaway. So one of the possible advantages of this is if you take a hit in a significant way and the energy is directed right at the mask, it is very likely that these things will just pop off. They're sort of designed to break away. The thing will pop off, and then you could prevent some damage to the headlight or to the mask itself because of that sort of breakaway feature. The Honda is bolt mounted, so the energy would not be dispersed like that. You could bend the bracketry and break the headlight, but that's maybe a minor point. The key, though, on the KTM is very easy to get to electrically and very easy to hotwire. So I think that the Honda definitely wins as far as that goes. So the Honda has taken more of a street bike approach. Honda also obviously has way more experience designing, setting up street bikes than KTM does. So you can see that their engineering emphasis, where they're going with that. So as far as the switches go, the stock switches now on this KTM, we've taken off the stock left-hand switch, and we've done that because we needed to free up some bar space because it's so wide. Let's take a look at how wide it is on the Honda. You see, you know, it's really wide. It's like 2.5 inches wide. The KTM's is a little bit wider than that. One of the things I like, the Honda's a win on the stock switch, and here's why. I like that it has this little headlight. You can flip it to high. You can just push down and toggle it down, and you've got high beam. I think that makes it better. And then it is thinner on the backside, and so there's no clutch lever interference. The KTM, take a look at your, if you have an EXC, take a look at your stock switch. It's super wide. It does not have that little high beam blip feature, and it's very deep here in the back, and a lot of guys will have clutch interference. The stock clutch lever has a little knob here, a little to adjust this sort of throw out angle. And because it's so deep in the back, a lot of guys will have interference, and sometimes guys will think they have a clutch problem because they can't pull the lever all the way in, and all that's really happening is the knob is hitting the back of the switch. So by turning and tweaking and adjusting the angles of all these things, you can correct that if that's what's happening on your bike. So I think the switches are better on the Honda. As far as the right-hand switch, on the left anyway, as far as the right-hand switch, it's a tie. I think they're the same. You've got the same 3 functions, you know, on, off, and then engine start. So the right-hand switch is a tie. The left-hand switch goes to Honda. That's probably good coverage up there as far as the air goes and the cockpit on both. Let's talk about lighting. Now the win over here to the Honda. Honda gives you a dual element LED. So there's a high and a low. There's 2 lights here. They're very well focused, they're very well aimed, and they're very bright. This KTM's already been upgraded. I don't run none of my bikes. None of the bikes in our fleet run stock KTM headlights because they're terrible. They're like a 3060 incandescent bulb, and they're nonsense. They're terrible. So we pull all those out and we upgrade them predominantly to the moto-minded. This is the XL80, so that's the huge, most powerful light that you can get that will fit inside of the mask opening right there. So the KTM is a total fail as far as stock headlight goes. Honda wins there. The tail lights, I think, are pretty well the same. It's a tie because they're both LED and they both do a good job. The turn signals on the Honda are a win because they're LED. I think anytime you're putting LEDs for lighting, it's a win. So there's that. Now, stator capacity. What is the power output on both machines? This one is a little trickier to suss out. The Honda manual says it's 140 watts, and then KTM has a claimed 196. Now, the 196 is the gross output, not really the net. So the net is the output that would be the 196 minus what it takes to run the bike. And it takes about 30 watts. That's a little bit of an over, that's a little on the high side, but you'd rather err on the high side than not. So I think you're probably going to end up with about 176 available watts on the KTM, where that Honda, the number 140 in the book, I think is their net number, which is the 170. So here's the bottom line. I think you have 176 net on the usable on the KTM and 140 net usable on the Honda. So a win to the KTM with more power available for things like headlights and heated grips and GPSs and all that sort of stuff. But both are more than adequate. So 140 watts on the Honda, while less, you don't have to upgrade the headlight. If you wanted to add a little light, so she's got the Cyclops, the little 4 bulb thing here, and I'll put the spec of what the power is, but that's probably 20 watts. I bet it's less. I bet that's a 15 watt. So she's got that. You could throw on GPSs and phone chargers and all that, and you're nowhere near going to be hitting the rev limiter as far as power available. If you added heated grips, and we have heated grips, we put those on over here on this KTM. So we've got heated grips, and we're running this 80 watt on high headlight, and we have plenty of power. And he's got his phone here with a phone charger, and then his Voyager Pro here, and we're totally fine. We're within the range on the KTM. You could because you already have that nice headlight on the Honda. I don't think you need to upgrade it. You could boost it like what she's got here. There's no downside to that. So I don't think you're gonna be in trouble with either of these bikes. KTM is the win, but I think both of them give you plenty of power. I'm not worried about that for either bike. Battery, both batteries are lithium ion. I'm going to give the win to Honda though, because it is a better battery. One of the first things I do on every one of my KTMs is change the headlight and change the battery. The stock Sky-Rich battery that comes in the KTM, I don't trust them, I don't like them, and I change every one. So Honda gets the win because I have not heard of or seen many, it's not zero, but it's nowhere near the failure level that the KTMs have. So the battery is a Honda win. Honda's just, other than stator output, the Honda pretty much swept the electrical between the two with the lighting and the battery. All right, subframe, Honda took that, so we already talked about that. Let's talk about emissions and the differences. So where do these bikes come from? Both of them are derivatives of their motocross bikes. So the manufacturers sell, the number one dirt bike really out there is a Honda CRF. So the sales numbers of the Honda are huge. They beat, the CRF sells more as a model than probably, and somebody could do the research and find out what these exact numbers are, but I bet you the CRF model from Honda sells more dirt bikes than all of the other models from all of the other dirt bike manufacturers combined. I'm just making that up, pulling that out of my butt. But I bet it's, if it's not true, I bet it's almost true. Almost, the CRF is like the world's most popular dirt bike. So and same thing with the KTM. I mean, KTM is selling way more dirt bikes, and by dirt bike I mean motocross bike. They're selling way more of that model than they are of these dual sport bikes. So they're not whole cloth generated. These are not one-off engineered machines. They are basically derivatives of their dirt bikes. And so they're tamed down and they're made 50 state legal and EPA compliant. And so things have been changed and added to modify them from dirt bike trim into these dual sports trims. And so some of those things, like on the Honda, is it's got a different camshaft than the dirt bike or than the MX bike does. It makes less power. It's got a different mapping, so the power is more linear, smoother. Both of these bikes have things like rubber countershaft sprocket. So right here, there is a rubber sort of ring that is molded into holes that are around the countershaft sprocket. You can see on the KTM where we've taken that off because the KTMs have some oil leak issues with the stock dome washers, which have some pre-tension. The spring, the preload of the stock one seems to weaken over time. So we really like the Dirt Tricks upgrade. You see these little black, well, they're just black because it's dark. You see these little holes here. Those are where the KTM's rubber O-ring, the chain dampening O-ring used to be. We pull that off so we can put this on. So when we do the upgrade, the chain becomes a little noisier. Also on the dual sport bikes, they use a different slider, which is a little wider and softer, a little more wear for sound. So these are ways that the manufacturer's trying to dampen sound. The gearing is higher for more top speed and the quieter at speed. Also on the Honda, they have put on this plastic cover here. And what that does is that's just holding engine noise in, just kind of gear lash noise. And so that's just for sound. Honda's trying to, as they all are, they're trying to pass sound emissions tests. What are some of the other things that are on there? Let's talk about what the emissions systems. So taking a look at the EPA compliance emissions equipment on both bikes. Over here on the right is the KTM, and so we've got the SAS injector. This is the air injector system, and where this thing lives is over here on the right-hand side. Oh, okay, so this is a 20-plus bike. This is only for the 12 through 19, but if you have one of the 12 through 19 generation bikes, this thing is what lives here on the, just at the exhaust manifold. You can see the exhaust header manifold coming out there. This lived in this position on the 12 through 19 bikes. On the 20, this was done away with, and if you convert your bike and use it for race use, all of these things are off these two machines because these are off-road use Baja race machines, and so they are no longer street compliant. And so these components have been removed for those specific uses. And then over here on the Honda, it also has the same component. This is just a little SAS pump, secondary air system pump, and the Honda's is right here, and you can see the architecture is essentially the same. I guess their orientation would be whatever, but it's the same exact components, just a single leaf stainless steel reed pedal that gulps in a little bit of air on command, and here's the little command solenoid that is operating that on the Honda. So on the KTMs, it's very popular to remove that. On the Honda, it's integrated into the water pump. And one of the things that guys will do when they air quote desmog these Hondas is they get a thermostat delete, which I absolutely advocate against. I do not remove our thermostats on our dual sport bikes. The ECU is using engine coolant temp data to make fuel management decisions, fuel ignition decisions. And so it is set up and is looking for coolant to be within a specified range, temperature range. And when we under temp that, then fuel data is skewed. And guys will remove their thermostats thinking that they're cooling the bike better or they're flowing better. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons that are apocryphal, but I do not remove the thermostats on my dual sport bikes. I have no problem doing that on a MX bike, but on a multi-sport cross-platform bike, like what we're using these bikes for, I always leave the thermostat on. So there's my little pitch on that. So if you wanted to remove the secondary air, and honestly on the Honda, now on the KTMs, this creates a lot of decel pop because it introduces air, oxygen at the final point of combustion. Just as the exhaust gases leave the exhaust valve, they're superheated, and so that fresh air, that oxygen introduced to the airstream right there, it final burns any unburned hydrocarbons through the header and out the exhaust. And so that decel popping sound that you hear on those KTMs is because of that uncontrolled, unmanaged combustion of the pops of the burn of the exhaust gases. Not really, for whatever reason, Honda's done a good job, and their secondary air system doesn't really produce any of those decel pops. And so for that reason, I'm absolutely neutral on whether or not you should do anything about this. I honestly don't think you should. And so I left that intact. We left this system on this bike. Now, one argument could be made that there is some interference with the cooling because airflow coming through the radiator is now obstructed. And based on that, I am considering removing this just so we get better, freer airflow across the radiators. But aside that, is there a reason to advocate for the removal of this? I don't think so. And so up to this point, it's been left on this bike. If you were riding your Honda like as a low speed single track bike, which because of the weight, no one's really doing, and I'm not going to, and I don't recommend it really. So most of the guys who are riding these Hondas are more mid speed to top speed type riders. So leaving this on really is fine because you've got so much airflow coming across the radiators. So again, that's just sort of like my editorial view on what's happening here. I think for the most part, for most riders, leaving this on is probably the way to go. These bikes aren't having that decel pop, and so I would just as soon leave it on. I also strongly suggest you leave your thermostat on. So those smog delete kits that guys order for the Hondas that delete out the thermostat, I'm against that. And I am also kind of for just leaving this system intact unless you're, like I said, you need and want maximum airflow across the radiators. And then I guess you could relocate this, but that might be a pain. So if you're going to race this bike, what could you do? I think if you're going to race this bike, then I would say go ahead and pull off the thermostat, because a racer understands, he's more of a sophisticated rider, and he understands that if he's going to ride this bike in the snow, he needs to block off one of the radiators, he needs to do some engine management, some heat management things. But if you're riding this all over in 4 seasons, then I want you to leave the thermostat on. So I'm against those kits that pull the thermostat off. And I think I've said enough there, so you kind of understand where I'm coming from as far as that goes. what are the other systems that are on both of these bikes that are shared? You have a vapor recovery system. And so on the Honda, it's this very, very big canister. This is the charcoal canister, and then the air control solenoid, which is right here. And this whole situation lived right in there. So we've removed this because these are failure points. This could create an engine vacuum, engine leak situation to the intake. And so we removed it on the Honda to eliminate that failure point. On the KTM, you have a very similar setup. Here's the little hose that goes to the intake on the Honda. On the KTM, you have a very, very similar setup. There's a few more hoses. This is your solenoid. This is the equivalent on the Honda. It's just smaller. So this is this on the KTM. And then as far as the charcoal canister, it's in the frame. And it's hard to see, but the charcoal canister has these two little ports right here, and it's just this rectangular vertical thing that lives right up in here. And so a guy can do essentially like this vapor recovery system delete, and you end up with removing these systems, leaving the charcoal canister in the frame. It doesn't weigh anything, and it's not, you don't even see it. And so typically, guys do that. That's what we did here in this bike. We just pulled the hoses off and the solenoid. And then there is if you have a stock ECU bike, then there's a dummy dongle that we have that will satisfy the ECU's interrogation of that system and keep the check engine light. And the same thing over here on the Honda, there's a dummy dongle that's installed that satisfies the ECU. Although we are running the get ECU or the Vortex on this bike, so it's not even looking at that signal. So the dummy dongle that we have in there is basically just, it's a dust cover to keep dirt and dust from going into the connector. And then we did the same thing over here on this bike. It's running the get ECU, so it's not even looking at that, but the dongle is plugged in just to keep dust and dirt and mud out of the connector. And then what else? On the Honda, on the KTM, there's a set of intake pedal reeds, and that gets stuffed here into the air boot, into the intake. And what that does is that is a sound dampening device, and it also has a nice net side effect of dampening out the back rush of the camshaft overlap on the intake stroke and on the compression stroke rather. And it does aid and boost a little bit of the low end power dynamics. So there are arguments to be made for taking it out. There's arguments for leaving them in. We have removed them on this bike because it is a open desert race bike use, dual sport, kind of a double track road bike. And so for the power dynamics, it's better for them to be out on this particular bike. And then as far as O2 sensor, because the get ECU is not looking at the O2 data, and also because this is a 12 millimeter slow response O2 sensor, it's just not capable of the data output that would be necessary for true closed loop performance. And so for those reasons, the Get or Vortex, neither one of them, use the stock O2 sensor. The data is just ignored, so it can be removed. So on the KTM here, it's removed, and we've got the plug capped, and then where this plugged into the harness on the bike, we have a little dummy dongle, also just a dust cap to keep dust and dirt from getting into that. So that constitutes the sort of the smog delete on the KTM. And then as far as the last component would be the exhaust, both bikes have restricted exhausts. The Honda, famously, as you know, is an 18-pound, the stock system on the exhaust is 18 pounds. There's a catalytic converter inside. And so if you're going to convert your bike to race use, then what does everybody do? They throw on an aftermarket exhaust. And that full Yoshi system weighs about 8 pounds. And incidentally, the stock exhaust on the KTM weighs about 8 pounds. So you have to spend a ton of money to get the equivalent of the stock KTM exhaust system for the Honda. So the KTM, as far as I'm concerned, wins on exhaust and then smog delete. It's quite a bit simpler over on the KTM with less there, less to deal with, less to remove, less expense. You don't have to buy a complete aftermarket exhaust for the KTM. You can if you like. On this bike, we have a Graves, which is a hell of a slip-on, but the stock end cap is the offender on the KTM, and just removing out the stock end cap and throwing on a like a Pro Moto billet opens up the exhaust. There's your airflow solution, and then on the as far as fueling, correcting the fueling, you can just throw on like a low cost Dobek EJK. Those are like $229 or $249, very inexpensive, and that fixes your fueling issue. You can do the exact same thing as far as the EJK goes on the Honda. There is a Dobek EJK available for that. There's a Power Commander. There's the Vortex. There's also the Get coming soon. All of those same exact components and products are available for the KTM. So there's parity there between the two for fuel correction. But again, a win over here on the KTM just because there's less to do to, air quote, uncork these bikes. Desmog, which is sort of a specific operation, and then uncork, right? I'm just using generic terms. All of that's easier over here on the KTM. So there's a win there. Okay, let's visit maintenance. Let's talk about the ease of maintenance on both of these machines. KTM gives you, or Honda rather, gives you a coolant overflow bottle, which is slick. KTM does not. So there's a win there for the Honda because you have the overflow bottle. Honda also is a win as far as oil change goes because there's one drain plug. On the KTM, there are 3 drain points. You have a main engine drain, and then a transmission screen and drain, and then a oil pump screen and drain. So there's 3 drain points on the KTM. There's only 1 on the Honda. The oil filter on the Honda is underneath this cover. So every time you change the oil and you want to do the filter, you got to pull this off, or you could leave it off, I guess. But the cover comes off because the filter is right here. Very similar filter situation on the KTM. It's 2 bolts, it comes out. So they're kind of identical there. Here's the main engine drain bolt on the KTM. Here's the engine oil screen, and then underneath down here is the tranny screen. I have a video on oil change procedure for the KTM. More complicated, but arguably more thorough and better engine protection because you've got 3 filters on the KTM. The main paper, or so you could go stainless on the main filter, but the main filter, and then an engine screen, and then a tranny screen. The Honda has screens, but they're inside the engine and they're not serviceable. They're sort of integrated into the engine itself. So I think I'm going to call it a draw because while it's easier to change the oil on the Honda, the KTM provides serviceability to those screens if you wanted to do it, and I recommend you should. So why don't we just call that a draw because there is one advantage that I think the KTM has over the Honda as far as checking the oil. Here on the Honda, you have to use a dipstick, which, and over on the KTM, it's just an oil sight glass. And let's take a look at that. And I like the sight glass situation better. You come over here, and then you've just got this little sight window. You tip the bike up, go vertical, and then, I don't know if you can see that, but the oil is climbing up inside of the window. So I like how you check it with the KTM visually. You don't have to pull the dipstick out. So I think there's, as far as that goes, that one data point is a win on the KTM. But the Honda is an easier oil change overall. And then both of them hold about the same amount of oil. Guys will ask me occasionally, is it worth getting a Recluse? Now I have a Recluse clutch in here, but guys will say, is it worth getting the Recluse oil cover, or even some other aftermarket ones that have a little larger oil capacity? We're talking just such a small micro amount that it's negligible. If it gives you peace of mind, do it. But in all practical reality, you're talking about 1%, adding 1 or 2% oil to your total capacity. I don't care. I'm not going to spend the money to put on anything specifically to adding oil capacity for either bike, the Honda or the KTM. So that's my thoughts on that. Tank removal. It is much easier to pull the fuel tank off of the KTM than it is on the Honda. You've got 1 bolt down in here, fuel pump connector, and then the fuel line connector on the other side, and a couple of radiator bolts, and the tank comes off. The tank on the KTM, you can, if you're working quickly, you can pull that off in 30 seconds. The Honda is much more finicky. You've got bolts down here underneath the tank that are very difficult to get to. It's very difficult to get to the fuel hose connector here underneath the tank, and then the electrical connector here. Now, Honda guy will tell you that it's two really experienced guys probably could do it in the same speed, but it's much more finicky on the Honda than it is on the KTM. Shock removal, absolutely easy on the KTM. It's two 13mm bolts, and the shock just slides straight out. Now this is the PDS. If you have a Husky or a Link suspension, a two-stroke or a Husky, it's much more like it is with the Honda. In fact, on the Honda, man, it's an ordeal. If you've ever had to pull the shock off a Honda, you know that you pretty much have to pull up the swing or the subframe and disassemble quite a few things to get it out of there. And then as far as the throttle body, if you ever had to remove the throttle body, you have to pull, again, you have to tip up that swing arm, and there's a lot involved, and you don't have to do that with the KTM. So that's a win on the KTM as far as maintenance, ease of maintenance for a couple of those items. Air filter. Air filter is harder to access and more finicky on the Honda than it is on the KTM. Very easy. No tools required on the KTM. You can check it. You don't have to pull the seat off. It's right here under the airbox cover. Let's take a look at it. Okay, so bigger, more surface area, and then easier to get to, easier access on the KTM than the Honda. So a lot of these maintenance items are probably, you'll see they're probably going to go, and the win is going to be over on the KTM. The KTM was really designed for pit service. I think that the engineers, when they put together some of the components on the KTM, really thought through whipping this bike into the pits and then replacing or servicing major components. And it's in many ways considerably easier on the KTM than the Honda. Chain adjustment, we call that a tie. Both of them have these blocks right here that give you the ticks here on the frame of the Honda, and then it's a 13 and a 10. So they're identical. That's a tie as far as both of those go. Changing wheels, swapping wheels, that's a tie on both of them. Water coolant, the engine coolant. Doing anything with that on both bikes is about the same. The water pump is just as easy to get to and service on the Honda as it is on the KTM. Rebuilding the water pump is basically the same on both of them, changing out the seals. The radiators on the Honda are a little fatter and shorter. They're a little skinnier and longer. On the KTM, they're equally vulnerable. Both of them are prone to being crushed, and that's on any bike. So put your radiator guards on, protectors as needed. The manifold is a little easier to take off on the KTM because there's two springs. On the Honda, it's more of sort of the Japanese style. We have the two bolts, the two studded bolts. You don't have to take off the shock or anything on the Honda to replace the exhaust or to pull the exhaust off, nor do you need to on the KTM. Let's see, anything under the seat here of note. You can just kind of take a quick overview of what we've talked about. The subframe, there's the air filter. The battery is easy to get to. The ECU is easy to get to. The valve adjustment on both, it's probably a draw. I think it's easy enough to do on both of them. I do way more KTM valve adjustments than I do for Honda, and so while there are a few little, maybe 1 or 2 points that each have maybe a slight advantage over the other, I think generally they're probably about the same. And as far as valve adjustment durability, now the book, well, let's talk about that for a minute. So maintenance. This is probably one of the, let me just quick here, do a scan. I think we're pretty much towards the end of this. And let's wrap up talking about maintenance. One of the things that everybody typically will have big issues over the two bikes is they will say that the Honda has longer service intervals between oil changes and valve adjustments than the KTM does. And just like where Honda, I think, derated their stat on load capacity, the weight capacity of the bike, I think KTM has derated its valve adjustment and oil change intervals on that bike in their book. And I think both bikes, the general fear is unfounded. Here's the reality. Both of these, I think, are very equal to each other in terms of reliability and maintenance. While the KTM has a couple of areas that need improvement as far as durability goes, and we talked about the battery, we talked about the fuel pump, those are clearly two areas where the KTM needs a little bit of help. The Honda, less so. So I think as a stock package, the Honda offers more reliability, better reliability than the KTM if left completely stock. But if you upgrade your battery and you sort out the KTM fuel filter, you upgrade the fuel filter, then I think, from what I'm seeing, they're very equal. And as far as oil changes go, we've been oil testing with some Motul 7100 in the KTM, and when the KTM is used as a dual sport bike, and so that is average riding, average speeds, with general clutch use. So what kills engine oil? Low quality engine oil kills engine oil, obviously. Contaminants kill it. One of the main things, here's probably the number one thing you can do to any dirt bike to enhance and to extend valve service life and oil life: air filter. The better you're filtering your air, the longer your valve intervals will go and the longer your oil will last. If you're also riding solo, then you can extend those because you're not breathing in dirty air from bikes that are in front of you. So if you're riding in a pack, you want to be the first guy or the last guy, and the last guy spaced out. You want your bike to last as long as possible, either machine. I don't care what color it is. I don't care what machine it is. You want to extend your valve life and your oil life. Ride in clean air and do everything you can to filter your air to the maximum capacity. So on the KTM over there, we're running the PC Racing filter base gasket. That's a rubber, kind of rubberized seal that goes around the air box on the inside, and so the filter rests against that to enhance its I guess the grab of the filter against the base, to improve that. And then you see we've got a filter skin on there. Twin Air also makes a filter pre-filter, so it's sort of a dry cover. You could also oil it. I don't know that I personally favor the filter skin, but I don't know that there's a performance difference between the Twin Air filter cover and then the filter skin, the PC Racing filter skin. I think both are equally good. So I run that exclusively on all my bikes. And then I also ride at the back of the pack and stay out of the dust. So what are guys getting? We've been doing oil testing. Motul 7100, you can debate this, but to me, Motul 7100 is the best oil to put in a dual sport machine, period. There are other oils out there, and they have their merits, but for the oil testing data that we're getting and for smoothness of the shifting, it quiets the valve train clatter considerably on the KTMs over using other oils. There's just no contest as far as I'm concerned. And we've been testing that oil through that with dual sport use up into the 50-hour range, and there's still good protection properties left in that oil. So you could, I'm not suggesting you do this, but I think you could probably push that oil to 60 hours and be within a safe range with that dual sport sort of riding. What kind of mileage is that? That's probably 2,000 miles. It could be a little bit more. So at the max end of reasonable oil use, I think 2,000 miles, 50 hours is probably my top max end recommendation on either bike with a very good oil. I would never suggest doing that kind of range with, go down from there. So you decide if you think Motor X and Ames oil and all the other oils. I mean, everybody's got oil opinions. But that's what we're doing. That's what we're testing. And these are the results we're getting. And I'm very, very, very satisfied and confident in giving you those kinds of numbers. Now, if you blow your engine up, now, here's a disclaimer again. You run 50 hours on your oil and you blow it up, it's not my fault. You need to decide what's right for you. You need to do your own oil testing. Your motor is not my motor. Your riding's not my riding. You don't do what I do, and I don't do what you do. So I don't know what kind of durability you're going to get out of your oil and your valves. You'll need to figure that out on your own, but that's what I'm doing. Take it for what it is. As far as valve adjustments on both bikes, I know guys who have hundreds of hours. I know a guy, chatted with a guy, he had 600 hours on his KTM and he never adjusted the valves. The guy thought incorrectly that they were hydraulically adjusted and did not need to be adjusted. And so he never did. He didn't know. And then when he finally, I don't remember what it was that caused him to get them to be checked, and they were out of spec, but just barely so. And the bike started and ran. It ran just fine. He had there was no performance loss whatsoever. So I don't want you to go 600 hours between valve checks. I know guys who are going 200 hours on their KTMs and they do move. I'm not suggesting that they don't move, but I am telling you that I am seeing guys get 200 hours between valve adjustments and they are still within spec, but they do need to be checked or they do need to be adjusted. And they put them back into spec. And these are guys who are good mechanics. They're self-maintaining their bikes. They set the valve lash to the top end. So if the exhaust lash is 17, then they go as close to 17 as possible rather than putting it down. Now, if you're setting up a race bike, you want the tightest valves possible. So you'd put it down to the bottom of spec. If you're looking for endurance and longevity of an adjustment, you want to put it to the top end of lash of the spec. And so these are guys who are putting in the top of spec and they're getting 200 hours. And I have been in the Honda forums and looking at the Honda guys, and I see guys doing about the same thing. So my ultimate sort of top end recommendation is 2,000 miles and 50 hours on oil, and then 200 hours on valve lash, valve checks. So that's sort of my official, this is what I think you should do at the top end, the reasonable the maintenance intervals on those two things on both bikes equally the same. And I've got a lot of anecdotal evidence to back that up. If you disagree, great. Change your oil after every ride. Adjust your valves every 10 hours. I don't really care. You do what you want. Do what your comfort zone pushes you to do. I'm just telling you what I'm seeing and experiencing out there on my own bikes and with other guys. So the sky is not falling. Guys will tell you that you shouldn't buy either bike because of maintenance issues, or they will say that there's an edge to the Honda because of maintenance issues, and I'm poking a hole in that and calling that all a myth. So maintenance is a tie. So let's finish up with talking about that. So maintenance, in my opinion, is a tie. So which bike is better? The Honda is, if you just looked at this video and looked at these results, the Honda is a better bike. And I have to give credit where it's due. The Honda, I think, is a better machine for more street-oriented dual sport use because of the weight, because of the subframe, because of some of the things we've already talked about. I think if you're looking for a more street-oriented bike, then the Honda's the way to go. It's 25% less money. It's just a hell of a bike, and it's a hell of a deal. It's a super good bargain. And so for a guy looking for those where those things are at the top of his decision triangle, then the Honda is the clear winner. The KTM, on the other hand, is lighter. It's more powerful. It's more agile. I never see the CRF450Ls, or for that matter, the X or the R, the CRF450X or Rs, out on hard enduro, tight backwoods single track stuff, because the Honda is just the dynamics of the machine and the power delivery are such that it's just not used by those types of guys. So who's the KTM for? KTM is for a guy who is looking for a much more spirited machine. It is way more performance oriented. It has a much crisper chassis feel. It has a sharper, tighter, sort of a turn-in feel. It can be, for me anyway, it can be ridden faster. When I have ridden both machines, now the suspension on the Honda here has been updated by Alex over at Conflict and did a hell of a job. I think he has improved a good fork. He's made a good fork better. And so it's better than the stock Honda shock was. The KTM over here has been completely upgraded with all the race tech internals like we talked about. For me, the KTM is a better bike, ridden fast, ridden aggressively, ridden. Now, I have not, to be fair, I have not taken this Honda in some hard enduro type riding, single track stuff. I've not done it, and I don't think I will. I don't want to ride to a nearly 300-pound motorcycle and that type of riding. So it's just for full disclosure, I have not done that between the two bikes, but I won't. I mean, I'm just not gonna. If you are out there hard enduro riding your L, let me know. Tell me why you think it's a better hard enduro off-road technical machine, and set me straight. But I'm just not going to do it. I don't want to lug it. I don't want to. So the KTM is my pick. It's more money. It's less weight. It loses quite a few things, like we've talked about. On paper, as far as this review goes, the Honda's a better machine, but I pick the KTM every time. I'm going to ride the KTM every time. Even on more street-oriented dual sport trips, I would not own the Honda and flip back and forth. So let's say I was going to go do a Utah BDR. I would not then go and take my CRF. I would take the Honda or take the KTM because I have it set up as a omnisport machine. It's completely dialed in for hard enduro riding, for dual sport riding, for one last thing I would say, the KTM is a lose on, again, I'm hitting hard against the KTM. I think it loses in a lot of these categories, but yet it's still my preferred bike and my favorite bike. The KTM is buzzier. There is less engine dampening in the primary and secondary engine vibrations on the KTM than there are on the Honda. The Honda is a smoother power plant at 70 miles an hour on the highway in 6th gear. The Honda buzzes less. The engine buzzes less than it does on the KTM. The KTM's buzzier. Put your hands to sleep. There's more vibrations at the grips. And we're right now in the middle of doing a video, and we're doing some vibration analysis testing to see what products, for example, like flex bars and the Mako 360 and the BRP undermount and all of the ways that you can dampen bar flex, and then brass weighted like tuning fork inserts into the handlebars and different handlebars. We're doing tons of vibration analysis testing in a video that's coming out soon where we're looking at ways to reduce that buzz on the KTM. And so the results of that are forthcoming. All of that said, I'm still going to ride the KTM, but the Honda is a better machine for those data points. So that's our review. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions, or you want to poke holes in what we've said, or you think we're wrong, we're full of crap. I'm fine. Slash and burn. Let's go for it. Let's chat it out there. I think that the Honda is the win. I think the Honda is the winner for all of those data points, but I own and ride and will only ride the KTM. But I like the Honda. I'm not putting a ding on the Honda. I think it's a hell of a machine. And for the right guy, it is absolutely a solid slam dunk. And then just in the same breath, the KTM for the right guy is an absolute solid slam dunk and wins. And it's a stronger machine for those categories. So there you go. That is my review. That is my take of the Honda CRF450L, whether it's in any of the year versus the KTM 500. Both dual sport machines. As I close, notice that we do not have the stock tires. I didn't mention that. The stock tires, I think, both suck equally on both. I'm not saying that they're terrible tires. I'm just saying that for the riding I do and for what I do, they do not work for me. And so we change those out almost instantly on all these bikes. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe. And no matter which bike you pick, go out and get some adventure.